Hi, I'm Tina. I'm 23 years old and I am a sexual assault survivor. If you will be bothered by or triggered by the topic of sexual assault or rape, please turn this video off now. I'm here to tell my story. I'm here to be transparent and honest with you about what happened to me 5 years ago. It's gonna be brutal and difficult, and I don't want any of you to feel sorry for me or pity me. I'm simply making this video to share what happened to me and what happened since then and how I've recovered from it and grown from it and how strong it made me. And I think that's really important for you to know before you get to watching this. 5 years ago, on April 1st, 2014, I was at work. I worked at a hookah lounge and I was just trying to make it home after my shift. I didn't have a ride home. My car was in the shop due to somebody bashing out my back window. It was an unfortunate timing, but my mom was diagnosed with a terminal cancer and my grandmother had dementia, and they were both at home. It was about 10:30 at night and I was not going to pull them out of bed to come pick me up. So I called some friends, I called my father, I called everyone who I knew, and nobody was available to take me home. So I asked my boss, and he said that he had to close up shop and he wouldn't be getting out of there until around 3 o'clock in the morning. My mom and my grandmother needed me, so I needed to get home. My boss then found somebody to take me home. It was somebody that he knew, it was a customer, and he asked him for me and I agreed against my better judgment. I got in the car with a stranger, a complete stranger who I didn't even know his name, where he was from, what he did. I didn't know anything about him. I told them that I needed to get straight home. They both agreed to get me home. And I got in the car. He told me, the man who was driving me home told me that he needed to make a pit stop to pick up his other car and that he was driving his roommates, and I told him that I just needed to go straight home. If he could not stop, that would be ideal, that I was in a hurry, that my mom needed me. And he said it would only take a second. So, I mean, I didn't really have a choice. I started to get a little anxious, and I just had a gut feeling that something wasn't okay, that that night was not going to be okay. And I asked him to drop me off on the side of the road, and he refused to. He locked the door of the car and drove me to an apartment complex that I've never been to before. I tried calling my boyfriend at the time while I was in the car, and he was sleeping. It was exam week. So once we parked the car, he told me to get out and go inside of the apartment and wait for him. And I told him no, that I wasn't comfortable doing that. So he grabbed my arm and he dragged me into the apartment and pulled me up the stairs and told me to sit down, that he would get me some water. And I was panicking. I was frozen. I had no idea what to do. Nothing like that has ever happened to me before. So I sat down, and while he went into the kitchen, I was calling my mom, who wasn't answering either. While sitting there, it was about 5 minutes later, my mom texted me and asked me where I was and what I was doing, why wasn't I home yet? And I told her, I said, Mom, you need to help me. I don't know where I am. This is the road that I was on, and we turned into an apartment complex. You need to help. My mom thought I was, I don't know, pulling some stunt to try to not come home, and she was angry with me for not being home when she needed me. She told me that she wanted to walk in front of a moving truck and die. And I felt so guilty, and I didn't know what to do. I was terrified. I was crying at that point. And this man who was supposed to be taking me home asked me why I was crying, and I kind of just sat there and stared. I didn't know what to say. I had no idea what to do. I just mumbled to him. I said, I need to get home. My mom needs me. You need to take me home right now. And he turned the lights off. And then some red light came on. He told me that he was a photographer, and that was his red light that he used. Then he wanted me to look at some of his photos that he took. And I kept repeating that I needed to get home, that I wasn't interested, that I needed to get out of there. Still in shock of what was going on, I just sat there and looked. I didn't know this man. I didn't know what he was capable of. He could have hurt me if I didn't do what he said. So I looked at the pictures, and he started to tell me about himself. And he told me that he was 24 years old and he was going to school to be a pilot, and that he was here on a student visa. And he was a Muslim man. He was from Saudi Arabia. And while I was looking at the pictures, he pushed me down onto the bed, onto my stomach. He held my hands down to my sides. I was pinned. I couldn't go anywhere. I was frozen. I didn't know how to react. I didn't want to get myself killed. So I laid there and I cried. And I told him to please stop. Please don't hurt me. Then he ripped my jeans off of me. And back then, I probably weighed about 130 pounds. And he probably weighed 200. He was much bigger than I was. I fought as best as I could after he ripped my jeans off. I'm sorry, this is a really touchy subject for obvious reasons. I've never really publicly told my story like I am. Anyway, I was on my period, and I told him that just to try to get him off of me. I was hoping that I don't know what I was hoping, but I was hoping that it would do something. He took my panties off, and he told me that he wasn't going to put it in, that he was just going to rub it there. And I said, no, don't do that. I am not comfortable with this. I need to go. Then he pinned my arm again, and I was kicking my legs to the back of his body that was on top of me. My legs were flat between his. He was straddling my legs. And then he put himself on my ass. And he said, "Just close your eyes. This won't hurt." I was bawling. I was screaming, "No, don't do it, stop." And then he forced himself inside me, anally, because I had a tampon in. I was crying, I was screaming. I told him, "Stop, don't, you're hurting me." And he kept going. And I tried my best to look at him so he could see that I was crying. I wanted him to see how much pain that he was putting me in, hoping that he would stop. And that just made him go harder. A lot harder. He kept going, through me fighting, through me yelling, through me screaming and crying. He asked me if I wanted to smoke something so I could calm down. And he kept going until he finished. I was humiliated. I was hysterical. It felt like a nightmare, like something like that couldn't happen to me. After he finished, he got up and went to the bathroom. And he left the door cracked so he could see me. And after he washed himself off, he went out of my view for a moment. And in that moment, I took off. I grabbed what I could and I ran. I ran outside, I ran up the street, I ran onto the main road, and I ran up to 7-Eleven. And I called my boyfriend over and over and over until he answered. And he came and he picked me up. And we drove to a parking lot where this man could not find me. And I called the police immediately. The police showed up about 15 minutes later. They took my statement. I was half dressed, my clothes were ripped, and I couldn't stop crying. The police escorted me to a clinic to do a rape kit. That was even more humiliating than being raped, because that's when it all hits you. That's when you think of yourself as a victim. After the rape kit, the police escorted me back to my boyfriend's house, where I got in the shower and I sat there bleeding and crying for hours. I bled for about a week and a half after the rape. After I got out of the shower, I went and I laid down. I couldn't sleep. I just stared, cried. I couldn't call my mom after what I'd already put her through. so I just suffered in silence. The next day, my boyfriend's roommate came into the room on the phone, and he said that Khalid, that was my rapist's name, Khalid, and I've never said that out loud. He said that he was on the phone and he had an offer for me. I told him I wasn't interested, and my boyfriend told him to get out of the room. But he didn't, and he looked at me and told me that my rapist was offering me $100,000 to drop the charges. Of course I said no. I wanted that man to rot in prison. I wanted what happened to me to happen to him. I wanted him to be scarred for the rest of his life. I wanted him to suffer. So, my boyfriend's roommate told him that I said no, that I declined his offer. And he counteroffered, like this was some kind of negotiation, like raping me was some kind of business deal, some joke. He then offered me $500,000 to drop the charges. I said no. The roommate translated that to him. They all knew each other. They went to school together. Apparently, they were friends. I went to work that day, and I told a friend of mine what had happened and what he offered me, and my friend kept telling me to take the deal, just get it over with. And from that moment, he was no longer my friend because he didn't understand, and he was not supportive of me in my time of need. That night, I went back to my boyfriend's house because I still couldn't tell my mom what had happened. And another call came through to my boyfriend's roommate from my rapist. Now he was offering me $500,000 and a Mercedes. I was shocked that this guy was still trying to negotiate my terror. My scar, my lifelong scar. I said no, of course. And they hung up the phone. The next day, April 3rd, they didn't have school that day. Another call came through. He was offering me $500,000 and a Porsche. I said no. I went home that night and I told my mom what happened. And she was furious that this man hasn't been arrested yet. So we called the detective who was on my case. I will not say his name. And we wanted to figure out what the hell was taking so long. And he told me to not get involved, to be patient. That was that. So we hung up. I went on about my day. The next day, the detective called me and he said that the rape kit came back positive and that they would not be charging my rapist, because my rapist had called and made a complaint that I was extorting him for money. So, regretfully, I took justice into my own hands. Side note, don't do that. Don't do it, it's not worth it. The detective also told me that he fled the country, but I knew that that was a lie. So I texted the number that had been calling my boyfriend's roommate, and I told them, okay, the deal's gonna go down here at this time. I said, bring the Porsche, but you gotta be there. The rapist, my rapist, had to be there. I had witnesses with me, and we went to the parking lot and we waited. I told my friends that this is what's happening. My rapist is gonna be here. I'm gonna distract him while you get the police here, so he will be arrested and charged. That's where I fucked up. My rapist showed up. I pulled him to the side and I asked for an apology, and he had the nerve to say, what should I apologize for? I said, you raped me. You hurt me. You scarred me for life. And I need to hear you apologize so I can get over it. I was recording this conversation on my phone. I was trying to get his apology so they would know that he was guilty. But he played me. And the cops rushed in from all four corners of this parking lot with their guns out, put a gun to my head, told me to get on the ground, to put my hands behind my head and interlace my fingers. So I did. Everybody in that parking lot was handcuffed. There was about 9 of us. We were all handcuffed. I was the only one in the back of a police car. The only one. And I asked the cops to come talk to me, and they wouldn't. They just let me sit there and cry. When they finally came to the car, I asked them, why aren't they arresting the man who brutally raped me? And they said, we believe that it was consensual sex and that you targeted him. You knew who he was and the kind of money that him and his family had. And we believe that you had consensual sex with him, said that he raped you so you could take his money. That's when I knew I was so fucked. That was it. So I rode in the back of the police car. I was singing Katy Perry songs. They took me to the police station. They put me in an interrogation room. I told my story to him, and he called me a liar. And he had my positive rape kit sitting in front of him. He told me that my story made no sense. That why would a stranger rape me and offer me money to drop charges. And I was offended because they believed his story, that I targeted him, had consensual sex with him, claimed rape so I could take his money. Me, an 18-year-old who lived at home with her dying mother, who went to work every day to support her family. I don't know. I will never understand. But they took me to jail, and my mom bonded me out. And I hated that because she was suffering too. I went on with my life. I found an attorney. We fought in court, but they wanted to take it to trial. But by that time, it was months later, and my mom was on her deathbed. So I made the decision to take a plea deal, to plead guilty to extortion, so I could be at my mom's bedside. She was no longer able to walk or eat or barely even talk. So I made that choice because my mom was the most important thing in my life. And I knew that that meant that my rapist would go free. But I had to live with that so I could be with my mom before she died. Here I am, 5 years later, telling my story. Not for you to feel sorry for me, not for you to pity me, but to show you how far I've come and how far I've made it and how much I've recovered since then. Of course, it's gonna haunt me for the rest of my life, but I now have 2 beautiful children, and I have a job that I love with all of my heart. And I'm honestly just thankful to be alive. He could have killed me. So many bad things could have happened, but they didn't. Just that one incident that I will have to live with forever. I am still on probation. I have been on it for the last 5 years. Hopefully, in May, I will be able to apply for early termination to terminate my probation, and I will have freedom. The first bit of freedom that I've ever felt, because I felt like a prisoner since that night. Not because of being arrested, but because I feel like he has held power over me for so many years. But I'm here to tell you that he hasn't. I've moved on with my life. I've lived as much as I could. That's the bigger picture. It's molded me into a really strong woman and a strong mom. And now I get to raise my kids to be aware of situations like that, and to let them know that I will always be there for them. They will always have me. I am just a phone call away, no matter what the situation. If I am dying, I will be there. I don't think of myself as a victim. Sure, I still cry over it. It's because I still see that man every time I close my eyes. Every time I take a shower, I think about sitting in the shower bleeding after what he did to me. And that he never got arrested. That he could have hurt another woman. But I'm alive. I'm well. I have recovered from it. And I am proud to call myself a survivor. And to all of you, every single one of you who have been through sexual assault, I am so sorry for those scars. I am so deeply sorry. But don't let it hold you back, because you are so much more than a victim. You're a survivor. That is huge. You made it out of that situation. You made it. If you're still listening this far in, thank you for hearing my truth. Thank you for listening to my story. Please don't feel sorry for me. I am finally happy. And I know that he will suffer one day. And I can sleep at night because of that. Spread love. Spread positivity. This world is so full of hate and anger and crazy people. Just be positive.